They say a cat has 9 lives, but I've spent 8 of mine dodging death. Shadow perched on the edge of a crumbling brick wall, his sleek black fur blending with the night. Below, the city hummed with life-flashing lights, honking cars, and the faint aroma of fried fish wafting from a distant market. His piercing yellow eyes scanned the alley below, every muscle taut. Shadow wasn't just any stray cat. He was a legend. Born under a full moon in a forgotten corner of the city, Shadow had fought for every breath he took. He had dodged speeding cars, escaped vicious dogs, and even outsmarted a cruel animal catcher with a net that could snap shut like a metal jaw. But his life wasn't just about survival. It was about purpose. Shadow wasn't a loner by choice. He had once belonged to a kind old woman named Grandma Maiko. Her laughter filled their tiny apartment, and her hands, though wrinkled, were gentle as they stroked his fur. But one cold winter night, she closed her eyes and never woke up. The landlord threw Shadow out, and the streets became his new home. Life as a stray was brutal. Shadow learned quickly that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. His nights were spent scavenging for scraps, his days hiding from humans who saw him as a nuisance. Despite the hardships, he carved out a small territory in the bustling city, a quiet alley with a broken dumpster that often held treasures. One evening, as Shadow prowled his alley, he heard a faint cry. It wasn't the wail of a hungry kitten or the hiss of a rival cat, it was human. Following the sound, Shadow found a little girl sitting on the cold pavement, her knees drawn to her chest. She was crying softly, clutching a teddy bear with one eye missing. Shadow's instincts told him to turn away. Humans brought trouble, but something in her tears stirred a memory of Grandma Maiko's warmth. Cautiously, Shadow approached, his tail low. The girl noticed him and sniffled, extending a small hand. "Hi, kitty," she whispered. For the first time in years, Shadow let himself be touched. Her fingers were cold, but her touch was gentle. She didn't chase him off or scream. Instead, she shared a small piece of bread from her pocket. That night, Shadow stayed by her side, keeping watch as she slept on the hard ground. When morning came, the girl was gone, but a new feeling settled in Shadow's chest. A spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. From that day on, Shadow kept an eye on the girl, who he learned was named Aiko. She lived in the shadows much like him, a runaway trying to survive the unforgiving city. Shadow became her silent protector, chasing off rats and keeping her company during lonely nights. But trouble soon found them. One stormy evening, as Shadow and Aiko huddled under a broken cart, a gang of street thugs cornered her. They jeered and demanded the little money she had scavenged. Shadow's fur bristled, and he let out a low, menacing growl. When one of the men stepped closer, Shadow leaped onto his face, claws flashing. The thug screamed, swiping at the cat, but Shadow was too quick. His fierce attack gave Aiko enough time to slip away, her small figure disappearing into the rain-soaked streets. Shadow paid a heavy price for his bravery. He limped away from the encounter, battered and bleeding, one of his 9 lives spent in the process. Weeks turned into months, and Shadow's bond with Aiko deepened. Together, they weathered the cold, shared scraps of food, and found solace in each other's company. Shadow's 9 lives were no longer his alone. They were hers too. But one fateful winter, Shadow's strength began to wane. The years of hardship caught up with him, and he could feel his 9th life slipping away. On a frosty morning, he curled up beside Aiko, his body weak but his heart full. Aiko held him close, tears streaming down her face. "Don't leave me, Shadow," she begged. With the last of his strength, Shadow nuzzled her hand and let out a soft purr. He had spent his lives well protecting, loving, and finding purpose in the most unlikely place. Shadow closed his eyes for the last time, leaving behind a legacy of courage and love that Aiko would carry forever. Years later, Aiko returned to the alley, now an adult with a warm home and a family of her own. She placed a small bowl of milk on the ground and whispered, "Thank you, Shadow." Above, the moon shone brightly, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a purring cat echoed through the night.